Sharon, who's a British citizen, translated her mother's description of how the abduction happened.
A swarm of people came through the fence. The defense cost 2.5 billion shekels, and it didn't help even a little bit. My mum is saying that she was taken on the back of a motorbike. When she first arrived, they told them that they are Muslims and they're not going to hurt them. And that they ate the same food that the Hamas was eating.
Well, in news here at home, the cap on bankers' bonuses is set to be scrapped. Currently, rules limit most bonuses to the 100% of salary that they receive if they're an employee of a bank or a building society. The financial regulator says the move will make the UK a more attractive financial hub post-Brexit. But the decision is being criticised, with Trade Unions Council boss Paul Novak calling it obscene and an insult to working people. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight to have a jolly encounter with Wednesday's newspapers, we have two fellow gagsmiths, Leo Kearse and Josh Howie. Good evening, gentlemen. Are you well?
Yeah.
Excellent. Full colour, muted. This is going to be the tone you're going to adopt throughout the evening?
No, I'm going full colour.
Are you? You're actually in the news a little bit later, aren't you?
It's exciting.
But we mustn't get ahead of
news.
ourselves. Don't become the story. It's what happened to Angus Staten, remember?
Oh, yeah.
So let's have a quick peek at Wednesday's front pages. The Daily Mail kick us off. Anger as UN boss attacks Israel over Gaza crisis. And a released hostage there who is also on the front cover of The Guardian. UN calls for immediate ceasefire to end epic suffering in Gaza. We have the Financial Times. UN chief denounces clear violations of international law in Gaza conflict. An unusually understandable headline on the FT. iNews. UN chief warns of violations in Gaza, provoking fury from Israel. The Metro. Brit cargo ship sinks in collision. They've gone off-piste. And the Daily Star, even further off-piste, red bugs under the bed. Well, those were your front pages. So we will kick off with The Guardian, Josh. I think Daily Mail. Sorry, skipped ahead. The Daily Mail, Leo.
So there's anger as the United Nations boss attacks Israel over the Gaza crisis, and he says Antonio Guterres says the Hamas raid didn't happen in a vacuum because there's been ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine pretty much since day dot. I mean, going back to pre-Roman times, I believe. Yes. You know, if we want to take it back to then.
Except the Palestinians weren't there.
Yeah, the Palestinians weren't there. I mean, it's weird that all the woke left have sort of seized on sort of Muslims as the victims. Well, when Islam is the major colonising force across the Arab world.
That is true, absolutely. That's only sort of 600 or 650 AD, but it is a valid point. You've got to go, where do you start the clock ticking? I suppose if you go back far enough, these were tribes without names, prehistorical. I think it's the birthplace of civilization.
Well, the only national country with laws, with its own currency, with a king, right? The only sovereign state was Israel. Everything since then has been controlled by the Romans, the Syrians, and various other nations up until the Ottoman Empire, until the British took it over as the British Mandate of Palestine. Right. So there's never been another country there since Israel, since the Kingdom of Judea.
Right. So you feel you're on fairly solid ground in terms of sort of the constitutional history of antiquity.
This is not a that's the whole thing. This narrative of colonisation. Yeah. It's the absolute opposite. It's the only case of a colonised people actually being able to take their land back.
I mean, that said, in the last 60 years, it's sort of looked a bit more colonising. Yeah. You know, it's not been quite so clear cut. So obviously there's been wrongdoing both sides, and there've been tit for tat battles. But at the end of the day, they've had various wars, pretty horrific wars, where, you know, the countries round about Israel tried to wipe it out. You know, they said to the Palestinians, you know, get off the land, we're going to wipe them out, and then you can have the land back. And they're wars that they lost. So, you know, why? I don't know. It just seems... Well, and they're also complaining that, you know, they're going against international law with these airstrikes. I mean, fair enough, they are killing a lot of civilians. It looks horrific. And I don't trust that they know where Hamas are. I think, you know, it's not as precision as the IDF would have you believe. But, I mean, it's a war. It's not like when the UK bombed Dresden, we were, like, you know, trying to minimise civilian casualties.
The issue that I find still confusing after 2 weeks, Josh, is the extent to which everything is just playing out as it inevitably would do. And I just cannot fathom what could have been Hamas's motivation in taking hostages if they didn't intend to release them. Was it simply to provoke Israel into committing crimes against humanity that would trigger a shift in world opinion? Is that
well, the question is whether they are, you know, committing crimes against humanity.
I'm not saying they have succeeded,
certainly to control, to make that the narrative.
Yeah.
No, my understanding is they had the backing of Iran, who also back Hezbollah in Lebanon, also have agents in Syria. So the idea was distract the IDF down south, and then they would attack from the north, which is what we've seen, some bombings coming over from Hezbollah. But of course, America was like, well, we're going to send some warships here, and have basically said to Iran, if this happens, we're going for you. So that has put a stay to that plan. There's another idea that it actually wasn't meant to be that successful either. So,
well, I certainly would believe, and witness reports seem to back up the idea that these were. There was an overarching plan 2 weeks ago, but the individual raiding parties had quite distinct approaches to it. Some of them seem to have been unbelievably bloodthirsty beyond imagination. Others relatively sort of orderly and disciplined in their activities. I don't know whether that just is human nature, whether that's just, you know, an artifact of the decentralised system. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, not really. I mean, the things that I've been seeing coming out, from the people they've captured and from bodies who were stopped, is that they had detailed plans. They had they were told. Now we're seeing some of these interviews come out with people who've been captured live, and they were basically told by their commanders that to basically kill all the men and to kidnap the women and in some cases to commit these most horrendous crimes.
So there's a subtly different take on The Guardian, although the front page is the same.
Well, it's really interesting, actually. I mean, if you look at both papers here, they basically do look pretty much the same. They've got the photo, they've got a thing, but they've got two very different ways that they present that information across. And in this one here, it's basically the Daily Mail, anger as UN boss attacks Israel. And of course, The Guardian's gone for UN calls for immediate ceasefire to end epic suffering in Gaza. Well, you know what? There's also epic suffering in Israel, where not only are they dealing with this mass onslaught against the people, but there's a huge exodus of people moving from the south of the country. There's a huge exodus moving down from the north of the country. But going back to this original speech, and that's partly my fault. I'm sorry, Leo, because I'm so excited about the story, and not excited is the wrong word, but
that's the word that came
built up all day, and is this speech that was given at the UN by the UN General Secretary. What is like the most inverted, ridiculous warp thing. When he talks about here, he's talking about their land steadily devoured by settlements. Gaza. Israel pulled out in 2005. They haven't been there. There are no Jews there. Their economy stifled. Israel left them a multi-million-pound industry that they instantly destroyed, and destroyed all these warehouses that were flour.
Gaza is not under the same authority as the West Bank. The West Bank is where the settlements are going on, but that is not under the same authority, is it? That's completely separate.
Yeah.
Can we just quickly look at the Times as well on this section, which is obviously similar sort of. You might have to hold this one up.
So the Times, so the Times has,
arrived
to read it. My nightmare goes on, cries freed hostage. Oh no, it's not that one. We're doing the rights body drops trans inquiry into its leader. So the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, which is the human rights body in the UK, basically there was an internal investigation against Baroness Faulkner that was viewed to be a witch hunt. They were she had the wrong, or what woke people would say is the wrong attitudes to trans, and that she just didn't believe, just didn't completely swallow all the trans ideology.
Go for the transubstantiation.
yeah. So they had this investigation into her, but it was all prejudged. They leaked it to Channel 4 News. So Kemi Badenoch got wind of it, was very worried that it wasn't going to be a fair investigation, and so she called in an independent legal expert to review the handling of the complaints. Upon that happening, the EHRC decided, you know what, we're not going to do this investigation because we're not going to be able to stitch her up, because it was going to be a witch hunt.
So they just completely collapsed.
Yeah, apparently so.
Well, I suppose that's good news, although it does indicate that there is a kind of rottenness in the heart of the state of Denmark, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, to see this play out and to see, as you say, a stitch-up playing out in the real time was quite an extraordinary thing, because I think a lot of the times people aren't aware that these stitch-ups, these reports come out, these complaints and whatnot, and here it happened and it was immediately called out, and because if Kemi Badenoch hadn't called for this inquiry, then the Baroness Faulkner would be tarred for life for some sort of bigger, when the reality was, all she was saying was there's competing set of rights here, and she laid out that it says very clearly in the EHRC that women have the right to safe spaces. That was all.
I do remember, I can't remember what it was, but there was one particular phrase which I remember thinking seemed perfectly reasonable, that people were screaming and clutching their pearls about, and it was some time ago now, though, wasn't it? It was. Well,
it was about 6 months ago they started this, or something like that.
Anyway, I haven't seen all of it to remind myself. I will say this: though, Kemi Badenoch remains, I think, favourite to take over
from
as next leader.
I think they made a big mistake. I think they should have gone with her when they had the chance a year ago.
But
well,
I think
she would probably have lost now as well. So maybe they did the right thing.
Give it a fair crack.
Exactly. Yeah. Finally, the Star.
Red bugs under the bed. So we've had a lot of bed bug stories, and the idea behind this story is that actually it's all Putin's fault, and it's all propaganda, and it's all to sort of undermine the West.
But the bugs are real? Or the
I don't. Do they exist? Is there such a thing as bed bugs?
Or is this bed bugs?
Oh, well, okay.
And they're horrible, and it's horrifying. When you find them, it's the most horrifying moment of your life.
Do you think it was Russian agents that possibly put them there?
I actually think I was living on Edgware Road, so I think it was actually the Gulf criminals who were living in the flat before me.
Oh, really? They did it well. They're probably working with Russia hand in hand.
I can't remember if I told it on here or somewhere else. No, I think it was. There was another channel I won't mention.
When you had crabs?
The story of when I had scabies. This was 25 years ago. I was travelling overland through Asia and I got scabies. I didn't know what I had. I didn't know, medical services. Just a lot of scratching.
Yeah. How do you get rid of them? Is it like sheep dip?
You have, basically. Right. You have to cover your body in a sort of embrocation, and it burns in all the really sensitive places, incredibly, like you're leaping around.
Is that what you were doing when I walked in?
I almost miss it. I wouldn't mind it. But, sort of living on the edge. Anyway, that's it for part one. Coming up, differing views on Hamas. Continue jihad and the real villains in the British gallery, city bankers. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute.
Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans, still here with Leo Kearse and Josh Howie. We have the Telegraph now. Josh, Emmanuel Macron, I think, little terrier that he is, a little more aggressive in his stance.
Yeah, West would fight Hamas like it fights Islamic State, says Macron. And the idea is that, you know, there was a sort of coalition, but it would be slightly awkward because there were countries like Qatar involved in that coalition. But and obviously Qatar is where all the Hamas leaders are. I'm going to try saying Hamas like the Israelis say Hamas, Hamas, but he's right in that. This isn't just about Israel and Gaza and Hamas. It's larger than that. It's about Islamic fundamentalism. And his country, France, that has suffered arguably as much as any country in the West, and is a huge problem and something that needs to be tackled head on.
Now, this is something I should probably have researched beforehand. I genuinely don't know. But obviously, France's ex-colonial past is Algeria.
Algeria is the big one. Yeah.
And they don't get mentioned very much when it comes to Islamic fundamental. Obviously, there's an integration problem. There's the banlieue and all that. You know, there's a lot of economic inequality. But I haven't heard of that being a source of potential jihad behaviour.
Yeah, no, I haven't.
I mean, it's a slightly different. I assume it is Muslim.
Well, I wonder if they're even more religious in France than they would be if they were back in Algeria.
Right. Yeah. It may not cause them the same problems, is what I'm thinking. Possibly in the same way that we saw as soon as Britain had any kind of, we stand with Israel. Immediately, the streets of London are full with people who do not stand with Israel.
Well, they are having these massive protests over there as well, and they're also the French police are much better at dealing with it. They're certainly not going to allow someone to be big. I think
Macron is pretty sound on this stuff, isn't he? He seems to be.
Well, he says a lot of things. Like all European leaders, he talks very tough and does absolutely nothing about the problem. So we've still got completely open borders, very porous borders, and also anybody can come and claim asylum. And we're seeing, the Belgium attacker was an asylum seeker.
That's true.
And we've seen, so the Manchester Arena bomber, he'd been rescued from Libya by the.
But sorry to interrupt. What he's talking about is a coalition of forces rather than a coalition of intent to tighten up the borders. He's actually talking about a fighting. I mean, this is something.
Fighting in.
We've talked about the UN sending in peacekeeping troops, and that I think remains a controversial idea and probably not, very effective. But a coalition, like an aggressive coalition of fighters, to go into Gaza, is that something?
I think it's going to be. I mean, this urban fighting that they'd be doing, like they did in Mosul, which was the coalition to eradicate. ISIS. I mean, that's it's very bad for the civilian population. It's also very bad for the troops. You'd lose a lot more troops than you do with. I mean, Israel's airstrikes aren't. No Israelis are putting themselves at risk doing.
Well,
those.
that's always the calculation, isn't it? Civilians stand in for anyway. Mail now, Leo. Keir Starmer's pro-Israel stance, following on in what we've just said, the least popular stance with Labour councillors since Theresa May's power stance.
So top Labour MPs face councillor mutinies in their constituencies amid growing party revolt over Keir Starmer's Middle East stance in wake of Hamas attacks. Most civilised people were appalled by the Hamas attacks, but these are Labour MPs and Labour councillors, and they're not as appalled. So Keir Starmer appeared on LBC, and he, people interpreted his remarks as saying that he backed Israel's right to besiege Gaza, cutting off supplies of electricity, food, fuel, and water following the terror attacks. So a lot of people, 37 Labour MPs, signed a parliamentary motion expressing their deep alarm.
So just to be totally cynical about it and just put it out there, are they thinking about their constituencies, which are majority Muslim?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, the Muslim vote replaced the sort of white working class vote in a lot of Labour constituencies that are sort of post-industrial in the north and places like that. And 85% of British Muslims voted Labour under Jeremy Corbyn, which is a huge. I mean, that's just an insane swing to one party. I don't know if it's the same under other leaders.
I mean, you have to assume Starmer, if he has a reputation for anything, it is for sniffing the wind, right, and attempting to play the percentages.
Well, Starmer's got to appeal to the middle. He's got to appeal to sort of Daily Mail readers as well as Guardian readers,
which I think is what he's doing. So I don't think he's as dependent on the Muslim vote.
No,
and I think that actually this is a bit of a godsend for him because you're getting out a bunch of cranks who they need to get out of to get people like myself or whoever to vote for the
37 councillors, you mean?
Yeah, these 37 councillors, you've got 37 MPs, but you've also got the councillors. They've just identified themselves. They've gone, these are the people who need to be out of the Labour Party in the next election. You have Zoe, what's her name, Zara Zoltana. She put up a tweet 5 days ago saying Israel killed 500 people in a hospital. It's like, and she still left it up, even though it wasn't Israel. There wasn't 500 people who died, and there wasn't a hospital hit. And she still got that up 5 days later.
I would say the Labour Party, I remember from my university student politics days, the Labour Party was pro-Palestinian in the mid-80s, and obviously there's been a lot of water has passed under the bridge then, but it's not as if it was a purely Corbynite tendency or indeed a pure demographic shift in the north of England. It is generally speaking, it has been the Labour Party position.
Yeah, well, it's a leftist position or a far left position that has sort of taken over where you had those dreadful shots in the Labour conference of just everybody with the Palestinian flag.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Metro now, Josh, and I begin to think if we just let Shamima back in the first place, she'd probably have gone again by now, but here we are.
Shamima Begum's citizenship removal was unlawful, Court of Appeal told. So this has obviously been going on for quite a while now. But the latest tactic is to say that she was a trafficking victim because it turns out the person who took her across the border through Turkey, I think, was a Canadian agent or sort of not like a James Bond agent, more like someone who probably was
just...
He passed him information. Yeah, passed him information.
Is it something like statutory rape just because she's too young?
Because she was 15.
So she cannot...
So they're saying she was a sex... sex trafficked.
I can see the point. I mean, I am... it's easy to be jocular about this, but I can see the argument that she was too young to make an informed decision, and that however appalling that decision was, some latitude could be granted, and also citizenship is something that shouldn't be...
Also, she was a problem made in Britain.
Yes.
She was born in Britain.
Absolutely.
She was created in Britain. So Britain should deal with it instead of trying to find some easy excuse like fobbing her off, putting her in a refugee camp somewhere. We need to face up to the fact that we've got these siloed cultures that are fomenting some pretty horrific views.
But it has to be said also, 15-year-old girls have been doing extraordinary wacky things, in the last few years. Joining ISIS begins to look quite traditional.
She's the one who groomed her friends. She was the most extreme of that. And I'm not sure if it was her, but I know definitely one of the parents, I remember seeing interviewed at the time going, how did this happen? We've been failed by the local council, we've been failed by the government, by the police, they let it go and all this stuff. And then they found footage of him at a march being like, death to Israel, kill the West and whatever. It's like, mate, come on.
He's a Labour MP.
Time's down, Leo. And finally, some good news. The city bosses seize the opportunities presented by Brexit if nobody else does.
So the cap on bankers' bonuses will be scrapped next week, if there are any bankers staying up with a bag of Charlie. Basically, this cap was introduced in 2014 to deter bankers from the risky behaviour that caused the 2008 financial crisis.
Yes.
I'm not exactly sure how it would. I guess, like, you know, if you're given money reward for short-term gain, then, you know, it can set things up for long-term.
It encouraged a culture of gambling, essentially,
Right.
playing high risk, because you didn't lose if you went high risk, but if you won big. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So under EU rules, this cap was brought in, but, you know, people found workarounds. They basically increased the base salary, and I don't know why governments feel the need to get involved in voluntary arrangements. You know, if a bank agrees to, like, pay this guy this much if he does this, why is the government getting involved? You know, if it's a regulatory issue, change the regulations to stop it happening.
I agree with you. It was, I think, all sorts of people from left and right have always said it was a very blunt instrument, if not an entirely inappropriate one. Yeah. They obviously felt they needed to do something. Yeah. And they did realise that under the Blair and Brown years, you know, all kinds of regulations that had been brought in after the previous bad crash, which I think was in the 70s or something, you know, were gradually eased off because they were found to hinder the smooth flow of trade, which is what these things do.
But then that's got us back into the same position again, every time. Absolutely. So they drop these safeguards, and then suddenly, guess what happens? But also, this is terrible optics for the government. This is obviously something that they tried to bring in under our short-term minister, Prime Minister last year. Kwasi Kwarteng was going to do it, and then that didn't happen. So now this kind of seems to have just happened in a cost of living crisis. And obviously, like you said, though, but they're getting paid, their base rates have gone up, so they're actually, because to compensate for those lack of bonuses, they're already getting paid loads more, and now they're also going to get the bonuses on top of it.
So the bankers' bonuses, I sound like the Harry Enfield sketch, the bankers' bonus, but the banker bonus calculation was that you couldn't get anything more than 2 times your base salary as a bonus, which sounds pretty healthy to me anyway, obviously. So to compensate for that, they'll pay your basic salary is now 200k or whatever, and then now they've removed that exactly. It's just going to go shoot.
But I think we need to recognise how much wealth bankers generate for the country and how much tax the country rakes in from these bankers. And they could, you know, the financial industry could move to New York or Frankfurt.
Absolutely.
So we should be grateful, and I think this is a great move.
Relief that it didn't leave after Brexit. I was seriously worried about that. We all love to hate the bankers, but the truth is that is absolutely a
for everything. But it has also been a huge generator of wealth for the bankers.
Yes, that's true. But then I work for the bankers.
How dare people make money for themselves? You know?
It is funny how much hatred the bankers... there was a banker who was a father at my daughter's school, and after, I think it might have been after the Brexit vote or something, and something happened anyway, and everyone decided the banker had shorted the pound or something. And I mean, he was almost violent, you know. He was like, kids were told that they couldn't speak to his kids.
No way.
Yeah. It is weird sometimes how virulent he gets.
At least he can pay for friends for his kids.
Yeah, that's true. That's it for part 2. Coming up after the break, we have Donald Trump on Robben Island. We have British workers shivering all the way to work. And for Oxfam, charity does not begin at home. We'll see you very shortly.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's on your teeth. It's on your teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. So the Telegraph now, Josh, typically malicious attempt to suggest that Donald Trump is not a martyr on a par with Nelson Mandela.
Yeah. Donald Trump compares himself to Nelson Mandela. This is him doing a big 90-minute address where he basically said, I'm like Nelson Mandela. And I feel like for me, he's more a Gandhi figure. You know what I mean? It's like...
I think of him as Antonio Gramsci.
Oh, really? Or
yeah,
okay,
a little Italian communist writing the diaries in his jail cell that would set the agenda for the next 100 years. I think he's always a little bit tongue-in-cheek with these things. He said, if I have to be the Mandela, in order to be the political prisoner or whatever, then I'm doing it for a purpose. But he has definitely, I mean, whether or not he believes it, I think he is starting to present that figure to a large part of his base. I mean, if they pursue him in this manner for the next year, I think they can very easily...
The only way he doesn't match Nelson Mandela is that he hasn't endorsed violence.
No.
So
he hasn't got a homicidal wife.
Yeah.
And a football team.
Well, I guess he is fighting against the apartheid towards rich people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think people, especially when the world's in such a state, people want a strongman leader, or at least somebody who can walk up some stairs and talk.
Well, I think there is some truth to that, although in his second term, after 4 years away, he may not be the ideal person for that, but he seems to have convinced the Americans that he's in a better position than, I can't remember his name, the Texan governor.
DeSantis.
DeSantis, yeah. But...
Florida.
I do think people are noticing. I mean, I have this row every couple of days, it flares up on Twitter. But the reality is, for all the hype about what a madman he was, his 4 years on the throne were extraordinarily placid.
Yeah.
Compared with what came before, and certainly compared to what we've endured since.
But was that the state protecting the system against? Because some of the stuff that we heard that he was trying to implement that kind of got thwarted
internationally.
Internationally,
I'm talking about wars. What do you think he was trying to implement that he was prevented from doing?
I was just told some pretty mad stuff. I'm sorry, if I would have done my research. But I remember there were lots of these cases. The book that came out, and there were lots of people like his defence secretary who was just like, we're not going to do that. No.
The government works best when somebody in government wants to do something and they can't do anything. Government works best when it does nothing and the people can just get on with running the country and generating the wealth. And overseas, he was great because he terrified everybody. Nobody would. I mean, if Russia had invaded Ukraine, Putin would have been worried that he'd have been turned to rubble.
Glassed is the term now, isn't it? Yeah, I think there is an element of that, but I do also think he genuinely was quite pacifist in his instincts. I think he was somebody who did not really believe in the military-industrial complex. I don't think he believed in permanent war for permanent peace. I don't think he believed that it was America's mission to continue to police the world indefinitely.
Very isolationist.
Yeah,
he wanted
Europe to pay its own way. And he was laughed at when he told Germany that they needed to get their act together and stop relying on Russian energy. I mean,
I'm not saying everything he did was wrong, or I disagree with everything, by the way.
Next up, Daily Mail, Leo. I think you better take this one, as Josh is in danger of getting a bit too close to this story.
Yeah, Josh is in this story. So a celebrity agent whose clients include Catherine Ryan and Jamie Dimitriou apologises for naivety over social media posts about the Hamas terror attack on Israel. So this is Kitty Lang, who's the head of comedy at the talent agency United Artists. Huge agency. Yeah. Their clients include James Corden and Keira Knightley. They've got some talented people too. And basically, she'd been tweeting or retweeting some pretty horrific stuff following the Hamas attacks. She said that the Israelis and people who support Israel were excited to see the dead babies. She also said...
she was basically saying the dead beheaded babies weren't real, like it was fake. Stuff. And then she
also described Israelis as paramilitaries. Like, so Israeli civilians as paramilitaries.
She said that was the thing. And it was interesting because she seemed to be referring to the people who've been taken as hostages. And she said, it doesn't seem right to refer to settlers as civilians. Perhaps we can use a new term like settler paramilitaries or something. Which elided smoothly over the very controversial, if not just downright wrong, proposition that those people were settlers.
Not at all.
They're not settlers. They're in Israel, right?
They're not on contested land by any means.
Exactly.
They were civilians, children, babies beheaded, children sexually abused to the points of breaking.
So it's right into that kind of...
We should probably say what happened to her.
Yes, go ahead, yeah.
So basically, one of a comedian from the underground WhatsApp hate group, the Allah Akbar group, spotted these, sent them to Josh, who's the attack dog, and Josh posted them. Then Lee Kearns, who's just a crazy man, Oscar nominated for a terrible film, then shared it, and this whole pile-on started. And it's great seeing these pile-ons happen to woke people now. They used to just happen to guys like me, and basically as soon as this pile-on started, she deleted her Twitter account. You could almost hear the white wine getting knocked over and the cat litter, cat food going flying. And she deleted it, and then she's posted this sort of lame apology.
And now saying, deleted it again.
Please let me keep my job, please.
And I told her, no. Well, it's not that I actually want her to keep her job. This is very surreal. This has never happened before. No. I was literally, last night, my night off, I was in my kitchen, got the message from someone saying, God, can you believe these things? And I was like, I'm just going to tweet about this, and then it's all kicked off from here. It's not about because as you say, these kind of witch hunts have gone on. So against people who've said that women should have their fair sports and whatnot. So it's not about trying to get people fired, but just to expose the hypocrisy of these people and the stuff that they're disseminating,
and then the fact get them fired.
Yeah, but the fact that she wasn't called out. How many famous people follow her and are seeing these disgusting tweets that she's putting out into the world, and no one called her on it? Yeah. They were up there for weeks.
And she's hugely powerful, or she was yesterday. I don't know about today.
We should have a word, see if Catherine Ryan wants to make a comment. Josh, the Times have the benevolent effects of the fuel crisis.
Britons ditch working from home to cut heating bills. 1 in 5 workers in a survey said that free heating had encouraged them to commute to the office more often. Now, that doesn't mean that that was the sole reason for them to do it. I mean, yes, my children are asleep in the boardroom at the moment, but obviously it's expensive. It's going to be. They're saying now that the heating bill is going to get more expensive again, and they're going to make more profit.
It's not been expensive yet, has it? I think we've sort of had ours. I mean, thermostat or whatever, but I haven't felt the house. You haven't had that thing where you walk in and like, the house is warm and you get angry. That feeling.
But they're saying it may well get to that point again this year.
You'd think people would have invented duvet suits or something by now for home workers. I mean, if it's going to be a new trend, then we've got to get with the program.
I think they're just called puffer jackets, Simon.
We all have, individually in our home now, an electric blanket each, a sort of...
Oh, really?
Plug-in, unfortunately they are plug-in, which is annoying. So if you're going to move, if you want to go make a cup of tea, you have to unplug it, take it with you to the kitchen, stand by the kettle and, share a But no, they're wonderful. You know, there's a number of different sort of shapes and degrees of control over them, but I find them very cosy.
The thing that could ruin things for us this winter is what happens in the Middle East, because we stopped getting our hydrocarbons from Russia, so Qatar and other countries and Iran as well start filling the gap. But, you know, obviously that's looking dicey.
Mate, and Dogger Bank will be fine. Oxfam in the crosshairs now, Leo. We'll have a bit of charities behaving badly. This is in the Independent.
Yeah, so Oxfam workers are set to strike over pay as the charity staff rely on food banks to survive. I thought they were volunteers.
I thought so.
But apparently not. They get a survey of 150 Oxfam workers found that 8% use food banks, 22% have not been able to pay their rent, and 34% have had to choose between heating their homes and feeding their families. Some can't even afford child prostitutes in Haiti. This is really hitting the staff hard. And Oxfam isn't even cheap now. It used to be, you know, it'd be famous, you know, for going in and getting a cardigan for 10p. Now you go in the same cardigan, it's still second hand. It's like 25 quid. It's like I can get this cheaper in Primark.
They're going for the vintage market now, aren't they? I only use the books and music, well, mainly books now, because music obviously is free, but I do like the Oxfam books.
I got this from Oxfam.
OK.
But yeah, but they need to be... I nearly swore there. But they need to start a new charity, Oxfam. Or Oxfam Squared, or Oxfam 2.0 for people who work at Oxfam.
Yeah.
It was the Oxford Famming charity originally, wasn't it? But so I suppose Shop Fam or something, I don't know. With the,
was there a famine in Oxford?
Yeah, it was terrible. Do you remember?
I didn't hear about that.
1234. Yeah.
Really? Do you remember
Just before the Peasants' Revolt, yeah. No, of course there wasn't. It was a famine in Africa and some Oxford students, proto-wokies. Anyway, Josh, Tinder news now, which you think doesn't affect you because you're a married dad, but actually maybe it does.
Yeah, this is really exciting. Tinder's new feature lets friends rate your matches. So you swipe left and right and all that, and you can now send up to like 15 friends and family, and then they can approve the people you kind of fancy or not. I love this idea so much because I got together with my wife like before all of the social media thing happened. I always felt like I missed out on the whole dating thing, like just the logistics of it and how it all works and stuff. So this is a great way. If people could email me, if you're at josh.howie@gbnews.uk, I will help you to choose because I want to get in on this action.
You know what the funny thing is, though? This probably does replicate the experience you had when you met your wife, because what people don't register consciously always is that when they're in a group of people, they realise who is generally regarded as attractive. And it's quite important psychologically.
OK.
We tend to be interested in people that we notice everybody else is in. Sometimes we're strong enough, confident enough, quirky enough that we kind of go, I know nobody else seems to like you, but I like you. But that's a romantic comedy notion. That's a movie trope. The truth is, in most social groupings, we pick up, we kind of monitor the signals that we're getting from everyone that our friends approve of this, like, possible partner. And on dating apps, you don't have that. So it's actually kind of restoring it to the experience you had.
Yeah, and that's a technique in pickup artistry.
Yeah.
So it's called social proof. So if you walk into a room with a beautiful woman on your arm, people are going to be like, oh, he must be attractive.
As is peacocking, which is obviously what you've been doing for that. Working on me, Leo.
Is that what you've been doing today? Have you been peacocking the audience? He's just been peacocking everybody.
Josh has been pigeoning.
That's part 3 done. In our final quartile, Halloween controversies, Uber ambulances and emerging artworks in the Amazon. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. For our final fourth quarter, we have The Telegraph now, Leo, and it is extraordinary how seriously Americans take Halloween.
Yeah, so striking Hollywood actors have been banned from dressing up as characters from blockbusters for Halloween because this actors union strike, the SAG-AFTRA, which sounds like some sort of militant group in South America,
or a potato and spinach dish at the local curries.
yeah. So they've been on strike since July, and these strikes can be devastating for Hollywood. Like there's a writers' strike, which so the people making the films didn't know how to crowbar in LGBTQ propaganda or turn all the white characters into black characters. It was really hurt their creative process.
Yeah.
But George Clooney is leading. He's actually being quite magnanimous because he obviously makes a lot of money, and he said, look, I'll forgo my money. The rich people should forgo some of the money so the poor people can get paid first.
But that's not going to help it, is it? They are striking. If I understand correctly, if it's the same strike, they are striking over some fairly fundamental changes that could be about to render them redundant forever. And I do understand that, like that existential threat. They're a bit like the ASLEF guys who realise that trains don't need them anymore.
Yeah.
Trains
so they're clinging on with their last bit of leverage.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, what do you think, Josh? I feel a bit torn. Generally speaking, strikes. Yeah, but
they need to, as you say, it's an existentialist thing for them but I don't think actors are going to go anywhere. You need real people at the end of the day. But the fact that their images can be used after death, there is a lot of stuff that needs to be sorted out, and healthcare and whatnot.
I mean, I feel like we need to draw lines in the sand. We need to face up to where the future is before we get there. But I will say, 6 months ago, we were all horrified, I think, by the sudden surge in AI art and the chatbot stuff. And then it sort of recedes, doesn't it? You sort of go, actually, AI art, it always looks a bit like
but
AI.
Then you never get...
just a series of prop book album covers.
Better and better. But, but the industry is still closed down, even though the writer's strike has already finished. Yeah. I think in this particular case for Halloween, they could use sort of British Halloween people because we're not covered. Yeah, they could go covered as us, or they'd go as like a Dalek or something like that. But I just wanted to be over because just before the strike came in, I had my first big acting job, and really I called my agent at United Agents, and she's not got back to me.
You're going to regret it. Guardian now, Josh. It seems they've used the wrong kind of rock on rock.
Yeah, that's good. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson wax statue to be redone after star criticises its white skin. And I think we have some images, and it's basically racist.
Yeah.
They've just absolutely whitened him up.
They've whitened him, they have. And also, it's made him, because he's got quite a sort of particular look anyway.
That's a bouncer in Hull, and there's The Rock.
I mean, he looks like a nasty piece of work, all white, doesn't he? There is an element about that. He looks kind of jolly and benign, even though he's huge when he's normally himself.
Yeah.
But the waxwork version looks like he really is just going to start something.
It's because he's smiling. The real one's smiling.
Yeah, it may be.
Also, I didn't actually know that The Rock was black. Like, I didn't know that Meghan Markle was black until she...
I think he's Hawaiian, isn't he, or something like that?
He's half Hawaiian and half black. Yeah.
Anyway,
Samoan.
They'll give it Samoan. They'll give it a spray. Yeah.
But they said something really racist there. And the museum said they didn't want too dark a tint because it made the face too hard and erasing its warm aspect.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty racist.
Yeah.
Scumbag news now, Leo, in The Independent. I think what upset me most here was the mention of the George Eliot Hospital.
Yeah. So a man faked being stabbed to get a free lift home in an ambulance.
You wouldn't get that in Middlemarch.
No. Yeah. I mean, what, I'm to just like ordering a pizza and getting a lift off the delivery guy. But yeah, this guy, Christian Monreal, he dialed 999 claiming he'd been knifed outside a supermarket in Warwickshire. So they rushed to see him but found him uninjured, and he told the ambulance crews he dialed 999 because he wanted a lift home. But the ambulance doesn't take you home.
No.
It takes you to hospital.
But then he was stoned, right? They found loads of marijuana.
Oh, yes. He might live next to the hospital.
They found... Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I mean, maybe he's in the psych ward because, he was...
Reverse hospital. He's like, if you put me here now, can you just take me back home again? They should do that. That'd be a great way for the NHS to earn a bit of extra cash.
Uber
On the way out, when they're leaving the hospital, the ambulances, when they get called out, they're like, does anyone want to go to Prestbury? Because just a thought. Then he spat on a bloke, right?
Yeah, he spat on the ambulance crew. He'd flicked a lit cigarette at one of the guards at the hospital as well when he was...
He's a nasty piece of work, isn't he?
Yeah.
But then again, you know, life has no doubt...
It's reefer madness. It's this marijuana.
Yeah,
it's 3 whole buds of cannabis found on him.
It's a lot stronger these days, isn't it? You can smell it on Oxford Street.
I wouldn't know.
Not like the old Oxo. Telegraph now, Josh, and some of the best original art you can find on Amazon.
Very good. Ancient rock carvings of human faces revealed in Amazon after record drought. They're believed up to be 2,000 years old, and they're sort of oblong, and there we go.
They're pretty basic.
Yeah, and they
aren't
haven't been seen. They found some of there was a drought about 10 years ago, and they still some of them. But this is the first time these might have been seen for hundreds of years.
They have a sort of contemporary New York graffiti vibe. A little bit,
If people are impressed by that, I've got a tree in Dumfries that's going to blow their mind.
And it's even signed.
Yeah, it's got a big heart. Big heart. Daz loves.
You know,
those square heads could be like aliens. Those could have been the aliens that were here 2,000 years. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Our final story for the evening, Leo, is the Daily Mail. They have a story which suggests we'll do anything as long as it's a simulation.
So, yeah, an unofficial Ryanair simulator created by teenagers in the Metaverse has carried out its millionth journey with hundreds of users flying on the virtual service multiple times a day. So basically this is created in Roblox, which is some nerd thing for nerds. It's like a computer thing, and you can create these virtual worlds, sort of like Minesweeper or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And so they,
Minecraft, that one.
Yeah, some guy who's never spoken to a woman created this simulator of a Ryanair flight, and it's been hugely popular because going on a Ryanair flight in a simulation is much more pleasant than going in real life, and also you end up about as close to the place you're going as you do on Ryanair.
But they've said they've created the sense of being in cramped seats. That you must have to physically do that, even in the Metaverse, mustn't you?
I think the CD tray slides out of the computer.
Right,
and presses against your knee.
It is interesting, though, isn't it, that people will do in the Metaverse things that they wouldn't want to do even if they were in real life. They would consider it to be a discomfort, an irritating obstacle to get through in order to achieve something. But you'd say, oh, I can simulate this, and suddenly it becomes
so bizarre. Well, he set up when he was 15, and the idea was that it would allow people to train other people because you invite people into your world, and there's like real money that exchanges hand and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it's become he's got full-time employees now, and one of them is a 16-year-old, and she said that she had to do like 10 days training about air safety safety and all of this other stuff.
Amazing.
And because they want their Ryanair system, as you say, to work better.
I think I might set some up based on my daughter, 19, spends all her spare cash on vinyl records, which are a ridiculous, encumbrance that you don't need now. I think kids really crave sort of analogue difficulties.
Yeah, and also if you play them backwards, you sometimes get devil messages.
That's
and
true.
yeah, if you've got the reefer madness, that can be very dangerous.
The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. We have the Daily Mail, anger as UN boss attacks Israel over Gaza crisis. The Guardian, UN calls for immediate ceasefire to end epic suffering in Gaza. The Financial Times, UN chief denounces clear violations of international law in Gaza conflict. The iNews, UN chief warns of violations in Gaza provoking fury from Israel. The Metro, Brit cargo ship sinks in collision. And the Daily Star, red bugs under the bed. Those were your front pages, and that is all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Leo Kearse and Josh Howie. We're back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Leo hosting, panellists Paul Cox and Lewis Schaefer. How I envy you, Leo. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you. Good night.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you